evening, everyone. It's Kalini Kent here, and it's lovely to be with you again on this beautiful Monday evening. Don't know what the weather's like outside. And I've got the lovely Irene Wignall with. In fact, it's not Monday evening, it's Tuesday evening. Oh, gosh. Tuesday evening with Irene. Lovely to have you here again, Irene. How are you, my dear?
I'm okay, thank you. And I did. You said Monday, I thought.
I think I've had a bit of a brainstorm. It's been a busy day and it's been a busy couple of days. I hope everybody's well, and it's really good to have you here. We're streaming to 3 different Facebook groups tonight, so please do leave any comments or questions in the chat. There is a comments channel, and if you want your name to show, what you need to do is actually give StreamYard permission. Otherwise, you'll just be showing it as a Facebook user. But please do ask any questions. The idea of these conversations, we've had a few now already. Last week we started, and the idea is just to encourage conversation, giving you a platform or a forum for you to share your ideas, share your thoughts or comments about what's going on for us. Also, any nuggets of wisdom you want to share. And the idea is for members of the iWow membership. In fact, we're actually going to be giving the opportunity for people who are members of that to actually come and take part and be a live guest as well. So anyway, without further ado, tonight, Irene and I thought what we would do is we would chat about bullying in the workplace. And the reason for this is because next week is Anti-Bullying Week. Every year, the Anti-Bullying Alliance makes they choose a theme, and often so much of the focus is on bullying for young people and at schools, but there is a lot of bullying that does take place in the workplace as well, or as harassment and such. So I just thought it would be quite a nice or a good introduction to the theme, just to start to set the theme of what's going on for next week. I don't know if you've had any challenges yourself, Irene. Have you ever had any harassment or bullying problems yourself?
I haven't. I think though I've always worked in an office space, and there's always been it's always been quite a big office, and you get people who you think the way they speak to people is quite bad, but it's just the way the person perceives it basically. But no, personally, I haven't, thankfully.
Yeah, and the thing is, what I suppose I wanted to start off by doing was maybe just sort of explaining that the problem we have actually is the fact that there isn't any anti-bullying legislation. So anything that actually goes on, it's very difficult for people to know. There are so many grey areas. Is it bullying or is it not? And because there isn't anything, what basically have is the legislation when it comes to adults is things like the anti-harassment laws, under the Equality Act, things like the Health and Safety at Work Act, your own employment legislation if you're with a company, internal grievance procedures, etc., or things like employment law and constructive dismissal if you were forced to leave the company. But the problem we've got is that the minute you start to sort of complain, or you have a problem with your boss, or if it's a colleague at work, it starts to cause discomfort. So if anybody's ever come across this situation, please do, it's sharing confidence, and just put any comments or add any questions you may have, because it'd be really good to hear and get anybody's feedback about this, and if this is a difficult topic for you and it's something you don't want to share on here, you're very, very welcome to contact me afterwards and we can discuss it. But, we just want to sort of bring up topics that may be of interest to people, and it may not be something of interest, but hopefully we can get discussion going. So the main thing I was just going to say is, because there's no legal definition, what often happens is you then have to actually glean what is acceptable behavior. And just like it is with young people, the main definition for bullying is actually 3 things. It's RIP, it's got to be repeated, it's got to be intentional, and there's got to be a type of empower balance. So effectively, that's why often you find it is with a boss or somebody who is in more senior position, if it's at work. And I think therein lies the problem. Now, I think you actually did some research as well before we got on, didn't you, Irene, about the sort of numbers that we're talking about. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, 90% of workplace harassment is never even reported, never officially reported, and that's a massive amount.
I mean, if you were in that position, why would you I mean, it's quite obvious why people wouldn't, because they don't want to bring up the problem, because in case they they might encourage more discomfort or make it more awkward at work. But I think there is also this thing about people not really being clear about whether it is harassment, whether they have got grounds to complain. Because I think there are so many grey areas, and often you put up with it because you sort of, it's maybe somebody more senior, and, you know, it's a bit like the Me Too campaign. People sort of are putting up with things because they were fearful. It might be out of fear. You don't want to, flag a problem, and in case it leads to discomfort afterwards. Do leave any comments. Oh, hello, Jeanette. Lovely to see you, my dear. Really lovely to see you again. So, you know, again, we've got quite a few examples. I mean, maybe we can both share. Harassment, because in harassment, in fact, is defined, I've got a definition here, by the Equality Act as unwanted conduct which has the purpose or effect of violating an individual's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment for that individual. So the thing is that unfortunately, the unwanted conduct, it tends to have to relate to a particular characteristic like sex, age, disability, gender reassignment, or marriage, or whatever. It usually tends to be a very tricky discussion. So that's why it's been so difficult sometimes to prove it under the harassment laws on the Equality Act. And that's why often you then have to take it internally as a grievance procedure. But so, I mean, should we share some of the situations? Because you came up with a few, didn't you, as well?
Yeah, and I think it's good to add as well. It's more than a person just disliking a person. We can't like everybody, and everybody can't like us. But it's more than just a dislike. Like you say, it's the repetition, and it's specific as well to that person. But yeah, what did you ask me there? Sorry.
No, I was just saying, let's share, because some of the research I've done about it, like, so it could be things like, for example, spreading malicious rumors or insulting someone. You know, it could be a word or behavior, or it sometimes could be just being rude or offensive or intimidating comments or belittling remarks. Those are the sorts of things that sometimes it can be. But it could also be sometimes very, very subtle, and it's where you're sort of excluding somebody, or you're making them look stupid in public, or, you know, you're undermining their integrity. Kerry, thank you for sharing that. Oh gosh, so Kerry, please do, you know, anybody, thank you for sharing, Kerry. So Kerry's just said she's been harassed for 10 years. The last 4 years, it's been unbearable. And you've actually had all of that. Thank you so much for being so brave and sharing that, Kerry. If you want to share a little bit more, what we're going to do tonight is just highlight some of the things that go on. And then what I want to do is, you know, we're going to touch on obviously the impact of bullying and why it's so important. You know, oh gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Kerry. And, you know, if you do want to talk about it afterwards, I'm very, very happy to share with you. And then we also have got sort of some ideas about, you know, in terms of the steps that you can take if you're in that situation. It will be interesting to see. You've said that you've been to court 55 times. Oh my word. And is this with a person who you're actually could you tell us the relationship? I'm not asking you to say, I think the thank you is because obviously I've said that we can talk after. I'm very, very happy to talk to you afterwards, Kerry. This is the anti-bullying is something which is a passion of mine. I have written my own anti-bullying program. And so it is something that I know quite a bit about. So the 56th time is Thursday. Gosh, so you're going to court. So this person, is it a person who is a boss or a colleague, and it's right? Okay, it's your husband. Oh gosh, right. Okay, so right. So in fact, it's not to do with work. So that's okay. And so it still does apply, because even though it's not at work, it's still the same sort of thing if it is harassment. Because again, the types of bullying can take many forms. And I did touch on this last Thursday when I was talking to Nick Brown, because bullying can take many forms. It can be emotional, physical, sexual bullying. It can be making you feel intimidated. It can also be, you know, the abuse, the words people say. but also it's psychological. It could be possession bullying. There are several types of bullying. I'm really, really sorry to hear that. Thank you, Jeanette, as well. You've just sort of said, I feel for you. So, Kerry, I wish the judges would take more care. And also you said, and his girlfriend. Gosh, that is really awful to hear. So, I mean, perhaps what we'll do is I'm happy to talk to you further, Kerry, afterwards. But maybe if we were to sort of go through a few more of the examples. Did you want to go through a few more from the list, Irene? It's from that sheet.
Yeah, I suppose the first port of action is to start a diary, and any interaction, any notes, anything that's said, whether you feel like it was bullying or not, any interaction of any kind with that person, to note down the time, the date, who witnessed it, what specifically what was said, and I suppose how it made you feel at the time as well, and document as much as you can.
Because the thing about it is that very often what will happen is very often in fact with a lot of bullying or any type of intimidating behavior is that what people do is they do just put up with it, and they don't say anything for fear or because they just don't want to cause a fuss. I have been horrendously bullied as a child, but I've also been bullied as an adult in different situations in theatre groups and stuff like that. And, you know, I've basically found that you often don't want to say anything because you just don't want to cause a fuss. And you think that you're going to be, you know, make yourself unpopular. That is a big one. If we were looking a few more of the examples from the workplace, it's things like if you're withholding sort of information so a job can't be done properly, so you're making that person do badly in their job. It might be sort of somebody sort of micromanaging you or overbearing supervision. I'm just wanting to give a few more examples of the workplace type of experiences, and excluding and ignoring an individual or undervaluing their contributions. So say if they've done something really well, making it obvious that you're praising somebody else, but you're not praising them. That's a real common one as well. Or stopping them from progressing. And then it can be obviously making threats, look, you know, or unwelcome sexual advances is obviously one which happens. I think people are far more aware of it now, but even so, it's just making people feel uncomfortable. I'll just share a couple more comments. So Jeanette saying, you've worked with someone who was very clever, always made that you got on, always made sure that they got you on your own. I know. I've been there, and somebody who was who actually ended up getting into trouble about it. Sorry, made sure you were on your own, so there was no one to back you up. Yeah, and that is the other thing as well. Sometimes bullying can take place, if it's certainly at school, when people are in gangs, because people tend to make sure that you know, power in numbers. There is that power imbalance. But I also think as well, when it's they're in a big group, what happens is that then you can't say, oh, well, it's that person or that person. You can't single the person out easily. But when it's one-on-one and it's your word against theirs, that's when it becomes a problem. So Irene's point about, you know, keeping a diary and making notes is so important. Shall I do the next one? The other one to do is, if you are in this situation, it obviously is about trying to resolve. So these are just some steps you can take to try and tackle the bullying or the harassment. And it is, apart from the diary, is about trying to resolve the issue informally, because let them know that the behavior is unacceptable. It's sometimes people can be a bit daft and they may not realize the impact of their behavior. No excuse whatsoever, but it can be, just let them know it's unacceptable and how it's making you feel, and it's making you feel uncomfortable. So I don't know, Jeanette, when that happened to you, whether or not you actually then made it quite clear to them, look, you know, you're making me feel very uncomfortable. It takes a lot of guts sometimes to do that, and that's why it's really important that you do try and do it. but they may not realize how distressing their actions are to you. So they need to be given the chance to modify their behavior, because if it was to ever go further, you do need to show that you've taken steps to actually notify them and put them on notice that you're not happy with their behavior. That's with my sort of legal hat on. And so if you find that difficult, it's about getting somebody to be with you when you actually approach them and say, look, you're making me feel uncomfortable. So-and-so's with me because this is the case, and I want you to know. And then, of course, if they've not changed and modified the behavior, then, you then have to take it to a manager. Do you want to do the next one, Irene?
I suppose this depends. Talking to your employer, it depends, obviously. If it is your manager that is the bully, so in that case, if you've got a HR department, you can go directly to them to explain your concerns and see if anything can be resolved. And if it can't be resolved informally, then go ahead and make a formal complaint.
Yeah, you see, and I think that to bring up as well for those people who. The challenge is that if it's somebody who is your manager, who you would be the person who you would be going to, that becomes very, very difficult, doesn't it? Because the minute you do that, you're whistleblowing, and so you are making a relationship with that person quite awkward or difficult, or sometimes for some people it can be quite untenable, and it then makes you feel. But as Jeanette has just shared there, no, you didn't, but she did it to several people. So you haven't. I think what you're saying there is you worked with someone who was clever, but they always made sure they got you on your own. And then the next comment was you didn't actually have somebody with you, but she did it to several people. So when you've got, the thing is if you write it down and then you've got a pattern of behavior developing, because of course it's happened to other people as well, and people are able to share that, it's really, really good, because it means it's like, you don't feel it's not you, because that's the problem with bullying or any type of harassment. You're made to feel almost it's your fault. And you start, the more it happens, the more you blame yourself. You think, oh my gosh, is it something I'm doing? But actually, it isn't, and it's not acceptable behaviour. I think the other thing we were going to share with you, you obviously need to make this formal complaint, and you've got to follow the grievance procedure. And then obviously, I would just say to you that really legal action is the last resort, isn't it? Because going litigious isn't really a nice or pleasant experience. But have you ever come across any situations like that, Irene, or in your workplace at all?
I haven't, no. Thankfully, I've never witnessed anything to that extreme. But what I want to say as well is if you see bullying happening, don't just be a bystander. I know it's hard, and I know people don't want to get involved, but if you see this happening and this taking place, then step up, or I'll speak to the person who's being bullied and say, I witnessed that then, and I can understand, how that made you feel. So try not to be a bystander. But thankfully, I've not been in that position.
I mean, last week I was talking with Nick on the Thursday, and because I'm actually working with her son, who, we were explaining about, because he is being bullied. And I think that there is always a cycle of bullying of different people involved. There's the victim who is always going through it. And then you've got the bystander, who is the person who is like maybe a friend who's watching on, but sometimes they don't know how to intervene, or they don't want to intervene for fear of being on the receiving end themselves. And also maybe if it's somebody more senior, it's a bit awkward or difficult to stand up for somebody. I think then you've also got the person who is the organisation, or if it was a school, the staff, and then you've got the partner or friend. So it's been shown that 50% of the time, people who are going through bullying don't actually share that they're being bullied. They just seem to keep it to themselves, because they don't want the other person, their partner or their parent or whatever, to get involved, because they think it'll make it worse. And then you've got the person who's the perpetrator. So sometimes it'd be nice to think that they don't know what they're doing, but often they're doing it. And there's a huge topic again about the psychology of bullying and harassment and why people do it. And it may be something that's going on for them, but there's no excuse. So it is about educating people. But I also just thought it might be useful before we finish tonight to talk about the impact of bullying if you don't do anything. And I really just want to say to people, it's really important that you empower yourself to take control of the situation and don't let it continue, because there are quite long-term aspects of this. I think, apart from the fact that it's causing a lot of stress, which can then have an emotional impact on you, there's also, I think did you have some statistics at all about this? I think you were looking at some statistics, weren't you, Irene?
Yeah, I was looking at the different effects. So there's the health costs on the employer and the employee. Obviously, they're could be phoning in sick because they don't want to come into work. That the actual physical health of the person being bullied, that will be affected as well. Not sleeping, depressed about it, anxious, and it's all got a knock-on effect within the body as well. So and there's other career costs. They're not productive when they are there. I think you said before about stopping them moving up the ladder, that they can't get promoted, and people who feel that the only way out is to leave, which is not the right thing to do, is it?
Yeah, and I think that's where, it's the presenteeism and absenteeism. The presenteeism is when you're obviously presenting at work, but you're not doing it effectively, and it could be because of the stress or because of the worry, and because you're just not functioning effectively, and then there is the knock-on effect that then you can then be criticized because you're not doing a good enough job. And then the absenteeism, of course, if they are undergoing stress or undergoing any psychological or physical problems. I think the whole new topic all about anxiety and stress and depression and stuff, but it obviously affects your sleeping and your stomach problems and all sorts. And so it's important. I suppose the message here is that it's really important, and that's why I think Anti-Bullying Week, I think it's a focus next week, but I do think it's important for us to actually address this all the time, and to think about, where are you, and there is help out there. I think it's just probably not publicized enough, but I'm certainly happy to talk to anybody if they're having any problems at all. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. We just thought it would be a good topic to just start introducing. The one point I also wanted to explain to you as well was, when you were saying about if somebody leaves work, whatever, that is actually can be seen as not just unfair dismissal, but constructive dismissal. I just wanted to explain the legal side of that. It's actually constructive dismissal if you've been forced to leave your place of work because the situation became difficult, and then you have got, that legal due redress. But so in summary, the law is you've got the Health and Safety at Work Act, the Equality Act for harassment, and then you've got, your unfair or constructive dismissal, because an employer does have a duty of care. They owe a duty of care to you to make sure that you are safe in your place of work. And so if you are undergoing any form of adverse behaviour which is affecting you, then it's in breach of their duty of care. And then you've got the employee, the employment legislation, constructive and fair dismissal, and obviously your internal grievance procedure. Thank you, Kerry. I hope tonight's helped, so that that it's not something that should be brushed under the carpet, and it's something that we should tackle. But thank you very much for your input. It's been really good of you to be so honest. So please do feel free to reach out to me afterwards. But guys, I hope if anybody else has got any questions, if any of this has touched any of you, is there anything else you wanted to share, Irene?
I just one point. I read this earlier on, and I quite liked what it said, and it says adult bullies don't simply target insecure people; they create them. So I think sometimes a bully can think, why me? What is it about me that has caused this to happen? And it's not you. They've created that insecurity within you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there are so many. There's so many different impact. The impact of bullying is quite severe, because especially if it starts in childhood, because what it does is it leaves behavioural markers on you, and what can then happen is it affects your self-esteem, your self-belief, your self-worth, because you can start, if it happens enough times, and if somebody's criticising you or putting you down or making you feel low or inadequate, it can then start affecting you in a long-term way, where you start believing that that's the reality. And actually, excuse me, that isn't the reality. And it's about you then building your needing to work on confidence and your resilience and mindset and all those things. But it shouldn't happen in the first place. I do think that is the important thing, is it will then start you having, you hear people talk about negative inner chatter and limiting beliefs. If things are happening enough, it starts to really affect you mentally, because you're starting to think these negative things about yourself. So please do reach out, get some support. And, it's important that we tackle this together. But thank you so much. And thank you for joining me again, Irene. So we'll let everybody know what we're going to talk about next week. And it's amazing how time flies. We're already on 25 minutes. We said we were going to do 20. But before we go, I've got my coaching cards. So we said we were going to do coaching cards every evening. I'm pulling a different coaching card. And in fact, we'd already chosen one we thought which would work here. So this is a question for tonight is, think of something you are having difficulty moving forward. And imagine what you would tell someone else to do in the same circumstances. And I think that's actually quite relevant, or quite a good one. So think of something you are having difficulty with moving forward. Imagine what you would tell someone else to do in the same circumstances. Have you got any ideas, Irene?
Well, I always find it easier to fight somebody else's corner than my own. So I think that's a bit like that. And it's a bit like you could put it to what we've just been speaking about. If you're actually in it yourself, it's a lot harder to speak up. But if I saw that happening, I think personally I'd be able to speak up on behalf of them. But if it was myself, I'm not sure I could. So it's a lot easier to fight somebody else's corner than my own.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's where the role of the bystander is so important. That bystander can really have an amazing impact on the situation. Listen, guys, we better go. It's been so good. So tomorrow night, another evening, 8 o'clock, please do join us. Tell your friends, tell everyone all about it. And it'd be lovely to talk. And we'll let you know what we're chatting about tomorrow night. Anybody got any ideas or any thoughts that they want to share or they want us to discuss, please let me know. All right, everybody, take care and have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.